The day began like any other, with the sun filtering through the curtains of our bedroom, casting a warm glow over the sheets. I had just finished my morning coffee when I noticed my wife, Lisa, scrolling through her phone with an unusual intensity. It was a Saturday, and we had planned to spend the day at the beach. The beach had always been our sanctuary, a place where we could escape the mundane and reconnect. But today felt different. As I walked into the living room, I overheard her laughter. It was light and carefree, a sound that usually warmed my heart. But as I drew closer, I realized it wasn't directed at me. Instead, she was engaged in a playful banter with someone over the phone, a lifeguard I would later discover. My stomach twisted at the thought. I brushed it off, convincing myself that I was being paranoid. After all, Lisa had always been friendly, but there was an undercurrent of something unsettling in her tone. The beach was crowded, filled with families and sunbathers, laughter mingling with the sound of crashing waves. I watched as Lisa walked toward the water, her hair dancing in the breeze. I felt a flicker of joy at the sight of her, but it was soon overshadowed by the gnawing anxiety in my gut. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. As the day wore on, I found myself observing her interactions closely. She had a way of lighting up the room, and the lifeguard, a tall, athletic guy with sun-kissed skin and a charming smile, seemed to be the center of her attention. I tried to engage her, to pull her back into our world, but she was lost in whatever moment they were sharing. Each glance, each laugh they exchanged felt like a dagger twisting deeper into my chest. That evening when we returned home, the house felt colder, more empty than usual. Lisa went to shower and I found myself alone with my thoughts. I couldn't shake the image of her with him. It was a simple lifeguard's uniform, but in my mind it became a symbol of everything I feared. I picked up her phone, a reckless decision born out of desperation. As I scrolled through her messages, my heart sank. There it was, plain as day, flirty texts, inside jokes, and the unmistakable spark of something more. My hands trembled as I read their exchanges, each word piercing through the facade of our life together. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than I could have imagined. The laughter I had heard earlier reverberated in my mind, now twisted into mockery. Lisa had crossed a line and I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was drowning in an ocean of despair and rage. The lifeguard had taken something from me, my trust, my peace, and perhaps even my wife. The realization struck me like a tidal wave. I had to act. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity and protecting what was left of my family. I couldn't let this go unpunished. The thought of the lifeguard smirking, thinking he had won, ignited a fire within me. I would make sure he paid for what he had done. As I sat there in the dim light of our living room, the plan began to take shape in my mind. It wouldn't be enough to confront him or to simply tell Lisa how I felt. No, I wanted him to feel the weight of his actions, to drown in regret for the choices he had made. I wanted to ensure that he would never forget the day he decided to cross me. The night stretched on, filled with a silence that felt oppressive. I knew I had a long road ahead, but the first step was clear. I had to gather evidence to understand the full extent of their betrayal before I made my move. The following days were a blur of emotions, a chaotic mix of anger, sorrow, and a twisted sense of purpose. I felt like a detective in my own life, piecing together the puzzle of Lisa's infidelity. Each moment spent with her felt like a performance, a charade where I was the unwilling actor. I had to appear normal, to maintain the facade of a happy marriage while my insides churned with betrayal. I started to keep a closer eye on Lisa. I took mental notes of her routines, the times she left for the gym, and the late-night phone calls that kept me awake. My heart raced each time I heard her laughing on the other end of the line, my mind immediately conjuring images of the lifeguard. I couldn't help but imagine what they were discussing, what secrets they shared that should have been mine. One afternoon, I decided to drive to the beach, the very place where it all began. I parked a short distance from the lifeguard station, the sun beating down on my car as I watched the scene unfold. I could see him, the lifeguard, effortlessly commanding attention from the beachgoers. He was everything I wasn't, young, carefree, and seemingly without a care in the world. I clenched my fists, the steering wheel digging into my palms as I felt the familiar rage begin to bubble up inside me. It was then that I noticed something. A group of teenagers were gathered near the lifeguard station, and a few were filming a TikTok video. As I watched, I realized they were filming the lifeguard, who was posing and flexing for the camera. It struck me as both ridiculous and infuriating. This was the man who had weaved himself into the fabric of my wife's life, and here he was, basking in the attention. I decided to take action. I pulled out my phone and began recording. I would gather evidence, not just of his flirtation with Lisa, but of his character as well. I knew that if I wanted to ruin his life, I needed to build a case against him, a case that would not only expose his betrayal but also show the world who he truly was beneath that charming smile. For the next few days, I returned to the beach, always at a distance, always watching. I recorded snippets of interactions between him and various women, capturing moments that painted him as a player, a man who thrived on attention and validation. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction as I compiled the footage, each clip a piece of the weapon I would eventually wield against him. In the evenings, I would sit at home, alone with my thoughts, replaying the videos. I felt like a puppet master, pulling strings from the shadows. I would share the evidence with friends, subtly planting seeds of doubt about the lifeguard's character. Did you hear about that lifeguard? I hear he's been getting a little too close to some of the beachgoers, I would say, feigning casual interest. Each reaction fueled my determination, but there was a part of me that began to wrestle with guilt. It was strange. Was I really the victim here, or was I becoming something darker? I wanted to believe that I was justified in my actions, that I was merely defending my honor. Yet, as I watched Lisa go about her daily life, blissfully unaware of my growing obsession, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing myself. One night I confronted Lisa about the lifeguard. I did it subtly, testing the waters. "You've been spending a lot of time at the beach lately," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. She looked up from her phone, her brow furrowing slightly. "Yeah, it's nice to get some sun," she replied, her voice light, but I could see the flicker of guilt in her eyes. "Have you met anyone interesting?" I pressed, watching her closely. She hesitated, and that brief pause felt like a dagger. "Just the usual lifeguards. They're friendly," she said, brushing it off as if it were nothing. I felt a surge of anger, but I swallowed it down. I had to be patient. My plan was forming, and I would make sure it unfolded perfectly. The next step was to confront the lifeguard directly. I needed to see the fear in his eyes, to make him understand the consequences of his actions. I wanted him to feel the weight of my pain. But first, I had to gather everything I needed to ensure that my revenge would be foolproof. As I steeled myself for what was to come, I realized that I was not just seeking revenge. I was embarking on a journey that would change everything. The man who had once been content in his marriage was now a stranger to himself, driven by the need for retribution. The days turned into weeks, and my obsession with the lifeguard deepened. My initial shock had morphed into a relentless quest for revenge. I found myself mapping out the lifeguard's schedule, noting when he worked shifts and when he was likely to be on the beach. Each day was a meticulous chess game, and I was determined to checkmate him. I had gathered enough footage to create a narrative, one that painted him as a reckless flirt, a man who took advantage of vulnerable women, and a threat to families like mine. But I needed more than just clips. I needed to understand who he was at his core. It wasn't enough to ruin his reputation. I wanted to ensure he faced real consequences. I wanted to shatter the illusion of his perfect life. One evening, as I sat in front of my computer, I decided to dig deeper. I began researching the lifeguard's background. His name was Jake, a 20-something with dreams of becoming a professional athlete. But as I sifted through social media, I discovered a darker side to his persona. There were posts from disgruntled ex-girlfriends, complaints about his tendency to ghost after a fling, and hints of a reckless lifestyle. I saved everything, knowing that one day I would use it against him. My plan was taking shape. I would confront Jake, but not just in a physical sense. I wanted to expose him, to drag him into the light where everyone could see his true colors. I envisioned a public confrontation, one that would humiliate him in front of his friends and coworkers. It would be a spectacle that would ensure he would never forget the day he decided to betray me. But first, I needed to find the right moment. I decided to wait for a local beach event, an annual competition, where lifeguards showcased their skills. It was the perfect opportunity for Jake to shine and for me to strike. I imagined him standing on the sand, surrounded by admirers, his ego inflated. And then I would swoop in, armed with my evidence and ready to dismantle his facade. As the day of the competition approached, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. I was anxious about the confrontation, but I also felt a surge of adrenaline. This was my moment. I had spent weeks preparing for this, and now I was on the brink of achieving my goal. On the day of the event, the beach was alive with energy. Families set up picnic spots, children ran along the shore, and the lifeguards were busy preparing for the competition. I arrived early, positioning myself strategically to get a good view of the action. I could see Jake warming up, his confidence radiating as he chatted with his fellow lifeguards. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the purpose behind my actions. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and ensuring that the man who had stolen my wife's affection would pay for his transgressions. As the competition began, I watched intently, my heart racing with anticipation. Jake was impressive, darting through the water with agility and grace. The crowd cheered and I could feel the energy rising. But I remained focused, waiting for the moment when he would be most vulnerable, when the cheers faded and the spotlight turned to me. Finally, the time came. As Jake stepped off the podium after winning a heat, I approached him, my heart pounding in my chest. He was surrounded by admirers, laughter and applause echoing around us. I stepped forward, my voice steady but filled with an underlying rage. "Jake," I called out, drawing his attention. He turned, surprise flickering across his face as he recognized me. "Hey man, what's up?" he said, his tone casual as if we were old friends. I could feel the crowd's curiosity shift toward us, their laughter fading into whispers. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "What about?" he asked, a hint of arrogance creeping into his demeanor. "About Lisa," I said, letting the name hang in the air like a loaded gun. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. I pulled out my phone and began to play the video clips I had compiled, each one capturing moments of his flirtation and reckless abandon. Gasps erupted from the onlookers as they watched the evidence unfold. Jake's face paled, his bravado cracking as he realized the implications of what I was doing. "Dude, you don't have to do this," he stammered, attempting to regain his composure. "Oh, but I do," I replied, my voice steady and unwavering. "You think this is just a game. You've ruined my marriage and you need to face the consequences." The crowd murmured, some people stepping back while others edged closer, drawn in by the spectacle. I felt a rush of power, a sense of vindication as I watched Jake's facade crumble. "Listen, man, I didn't mean to," he started, but I cut him off. "No, you didn't think at all," I spat back, my anger boiling over. "You thought you could have your fun without repercussions. Well, welcome to reality." As I looked into his eyes, I could see the fear reflected back at me. This was what I had wanted, the moment when he realized the depth of his mistakes. I wanted him to feel the weight of my pain, to understand that he had crossed a line he could never uncross. As the confrontation unfolded, I felt a mix of satisfaction and dread. I knew I was crossing a line myself, but at that moment I didn't care. I was consumed by the need for revenge, and nothing would stop me now. The confrontation reached a fever pitch, the crowd buzzing with excitement and shock. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, heightening my senses as I watched Jake squirm under the weight of my accusations. The laughter that had once surrounded him had dissipated, replaced by a palpable tension. People were riveted, their eyes darting between us, as if they were witnessing a live drama unfold. "Look, man, I didn't know you were married," Jake stammered, his bravado completely stripped away. I could see the panic rising in his eyes. He was no longer the confident lifeguard, but a man cornered, desperate to salvage what little dignity he had left. Didn't know, I echoed, letting the incredulity seep into my voice. You were flirting with her right in front of me. You think that's acceptable? You think you can just waltz into my life and take what you want without any consequences? My words cut through the air like a knife, each syllable laced with the venom of betrayal. The crowd murmured again, some people shaking their heads in disbelief, while others pulled out their phones to capture the moment. I felt a surge of power. I was no longer just a wronged husband. I was an avenger, delivering justice in real time. Listen, man, I'm sorry, Jake continued, his voice shaky. I didn't mean to come between you two, it was just some harmless flirting. Harmless, I scoffed. You think it's harmless to flirt with a married woman. You think it's harmless to make her laugh and feel special while I'm at home, oblivious to your little games. You're a coward. The crowd shifted, some people nodding in agreement while others looked uncomfortable, unsure of how to react. I could see the lifeguard's friends forming a tight circle around him, trying to shield him from the humiliation. But I wasn't done yet. No, this isn't over, I said, my voice rising. You're going to pay for this. You think you can just walk away from the mess you've created. I'm going to make sure everyone knows who you really are. Jake's face paled further, and I could sense the fear mingling with anger in his expression. What are you going to do? He spat, his tone defiant but tinged with uncertainty. Let's just say I have a few tricks up my sleeve, I replied, the satisfaction of my plan unfolding fueling my resolve. And you'll wish you had never crossed paths with me. As I stepped back, allowing the crowd to absorb the confrontation, I felt a mix of triumph and dread. I had publicly humiliated him, stripped him of the charm that had attracted Lisa in the first place, but I also sensed that this was just the beginning. I had set a chain of events in motion, and I was determined to see it through to the end. The event wrapped up, but I lingered, watching as Jake's friends attempted to console him. I could see the whispers spreading through the crowd, people exchanging glances and murmurs about the lifeguard who had crossed a line. I knew that the damage was done, but I also realized that I needed to keep the momentum going. Later that evening, I returned home, my heart still racing from the adrenaline of the confrontation. Lisa was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, completely unaware of the chaos that had unfolded at the beach. I felt a surge of anger as I looked at her, the woman who had betrayed me. The betrayal was still fresh, and I was determined to let her know that I wouldn't back down. Did you hear what happened at the beach today? I asked, my voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of tension. She looked up, her brow furrowing. No, what happened? I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. I wanted to expose Jake to her to make her understand the depth of his betrayal and the consequences of her actions. I confronted Jake. I showed everyone what he's really like. Her eyes widened, and I could see the realization wash over her. You did what? She asked, her voice rising in disbelief. I made sure everyone knows he's not the good guy you think he is. I replied, my tone firm. He's a player, and I wanted to make sure you see him for what he truly is. Why would you do that? She asked, her voice trembling. That's not going to fix anything. Maybe not, but it's a start, I shot back, the frustration bubbling to the surface. You need to understand that what he did was wrong. You need to realize that he took something from us. Lisa's expression shifted from disbelief to anger. You're being irrational. You can't just ruin someone's life because of a mistake. A mistake? I echoed, my voice rising. This wasn't just a mistake, Lisa. This was a choice he made to flirt with you, to invade our lives. You need to see that. The tension in the room was palpable, and I could feel the distance between us growing. I wanted her to understand my pain, to see the betrayal for what it was, but all I saw was confusion and anger reflected back at me. I can't believe you would stoop this low, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. This isn't you. Maybe this is who I am now, I snapped, the weight of my actions crashing down on me. You've pushed me to this point. I didn't ask for this, but here we are. As I stormed out of the room, I felt the walls closing in around me. I had taken a step into darkness, and I wasn't sure if I could find my way back. I had set out for revenge, but now I was beginning to question the path I had chosen. But I couldn't turn back now. I had come too far and I needed to see this through to the end. Jake would pay for his betrayal, and I would make sure he felt the consequences of his actions. After the confrontation with Lisa, I found myself adrift in a sea of conflicting emotions. Part of me was still fueled by the adrenaline of my public showdown with Jake, but another part of me felt the weight of my actions pressing down, a heavy reminder that revenge never comes without a cost. I had crossed a line and now I was grappling with the consequences, not just for Jake, but for myself and my marriage. The days that followed were filled with tension. Lisa and I barely spoke, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. I could sense her resentment towards me growing, and the guilt began to gnaw at my insides. I had set out to ruin Jake's life, but in doing so I had also put my own marriage at risk. Was this what I wanted? To destroy not only him but also the woman I once loved? But there was no turning back. I had a mission, and I was determined to see it through. I spent hours refining my plan, making sure every detail was in place. I had already shared the videos with a few friends, and now I needed to take it a step further. I wanted to ensure that Jake faced real repercussions for his actions, and I had a few ideas on how to make that happen. I decided to reach out to the manager of the beach, the person responsible for hearing lifeguards. I crafted an anonymous email detailing Jake's behavior, the flirtations, and the videos I had collected. I made sure to paint a picture of a man who could not be trusted around families, someone whose actions could endanger the very people he was supposed to protect. As I hit send, I felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with a twinge of doubt. Was I doing the right thing? I had convinced myself that I was, but deep down, there was a nagging voice reminding me that I was crossing a moral line. I had become the very thing I despised, a man who would stop at nothing for revenge. The next few days were agonizing as I waited for a response. I kept checking my email obsessively, my heart racing each time I heard the familiar ping. I imagined the chaos my email would cause in Jake's life, picturing him being called into the manager's office, his face falling as he realized the consequences of his actions. Then, finally, I received a reply. The manager thanked me for bringing the matter to his attention and assured me that he would investigate the claims. A chill ran down my spine as I realized that I had set a series of events in motion that I could no longer control. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than I expected. I was at home when I received a frantic call from one of my friends who had been at the beach competition. "You won't believe what happened," he said, his voice filled with excitement. "Jake got fired. The manager confronted him about the allegations, and he didn't even deny it." A wave of satisfaction washed over me, but it was quickly followed by an unsettling emptiness. I had achieved what I set out to do, yet I felt no joy in Jake's downfall. Instead, I was left grappling with the reality that my actions had real-world consequences. That evening I sat with Lisa, who had just returned home from work. The tension hung heavy in the air, and I could feel the weight of my actions pressing down on both of us. "Did you hear about Jake?" I asked, trying to gauge her reaction. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "Yeah, I heard he got fired. What a shame," she replied, her tone flat. "A shame," I echoed, incredulous. "He was flirting with you, Lisa. He disrespected our marriage, and you think it's a shame." She sighed, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "You don't understand. This isn't just about him. You've turned this into a public spectacle. Do you think I wanted any of this? Do you think I wanted it either?" I shot back, my anger flaring. "You were the one who let him in, who allowed him to cross that line. I had to do something." "Something? You ruined his life. You think that's going to fix ours?" she said, her voice rising in disbelief. The fight escalated, each word exchanged like a weapon, and I could feel the walls closing in around us. I wanted her to understand my pain, to see the depth of my betrayal, but instead I was met with opposition. "I don't know if I can be with someone who would go this far," she finally said, her voice trembling. "This isn't who you are." "Maybe it is now," I replied, the bitterness seeping into my tone. "You pushed me to this. You made me feel powerless, and I won't let anyone take advantage of me again." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the distance between us growing, a chasm that felt insurmountable. I had set out to reclaim my dignity, but in the process I had jeopardized everything we had built together. As the days turned into weeks, I watched as Jake's life unraveled. News of his firing spread quickly, and I could see the whispers and judgment directed at him. I felt a sense of vindication each time I heard someone mention his name, but it was quickly overshadowed by the gnawing guilt that had taken root in my heart. I had achieved my revenge, but at what cost? My marriage was hanging by a thread, and I was left to confront the reality that my actions had consequences far beyond what I had anticipated. As I reflected on my choices, I realized that revenge had not brought me the satisfaction I had hoped for. Instead, it had opened a Pandora's box of regret and sorrow. I was left with a choice: continue down this path of destruction or find a way to rebuild what was left. But could I ever truly rebuild after everything I had done? The weight of my actions pressed down on me like a suffocating blanket. I had set out to ruin Jake, to make him feel the pain I was experiencing, but in doing so I had also risked losing the one person I had vowed to love and cherish. Lisa was still here, but she felt distant, like a ghost haunting the corners of our home. The laughter that once filled our lives had been replaced by an uncomfortable silence, and I was left grappling with the reality of what I had done. Days turned into weeks, and I watched as Jake attempted to pick up the pieces of his life. I saw him at the beach, no longer a lifeguard but a man stripped of his pride. I felt a pang of guilt each time I saw him, a reminder of the consequences of my revenge. I had wanted him to hurt, to feel the sting of his actions, but seeing him now, a shell of his former self, made me question whether I had gone too far. One evening, after another long day of silence between Lisa and me, I finally mustered the courage to confront her. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the air thick with tension. I could see the hurt in her eyes, and it was a reflection of my own pain. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "About what?" she replied, her tone guarded. "About everything," I said, taking a deep breath. "About Jake, about us. I know I've made mistakes, and I need you to understand why I did what I did." She looked at me, her expression softening slightly. "I'm listening," she said, but I could see the wariness in her eyes. "I was hurt, Lisa. I felt betrayed, and I didn't know how to cope. I thought that by taking action against Jake, I would reclaim my dignity, my sense of control. But instead, I've only made things worse." I confessed, the weight of my guilt spilling out. "Do you even realize how far you went?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You ruined a man's life all because of a choice he made. And what about us? You've turned our marriage into a battlefield." "I know, and I'm sorry," I said, feeling the tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I let my anger consume me, and I lost sight of what truly mattered. "I don't want to lose you, Lisa. I love you, and I want to make this right." For a moment, silence enveloped us, the gravity of my words hanging in the air. I could see her wrestling with her emotions, torn between the love we once shared and the anger she felt towards me. "I don't know if it's that easy," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can't just say you're sorry and expect everything to go back to normal." "I know it's not that simple," I replied, desperation creeping into my voice. "But I want to try. I want to rebuild what we had. I want to be the man you fell in love with, not the man who sought revenge. I need you to give me a chance." As I spoke, I could see the walls she had built around her heart beginning to crack. "It's going to take time," she said, her voice steadier now. "Trust doesn't come easily, especially after what you've done. But maybe we can work on it together." I nodded, feeling a flicker of hope igniting within me. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'll seek help, talk to someone. I need to understand why I let my anger control me." Over the next few weeks, we started to rebuild. I sought therapy, determined to confront the darkness that had consumed me. I learned to express my feelings instead of letting them fester, and I began to understand the impact my actions had on both myself and Lisa. We took small steps, rebuilding our communication and trust. It wasn't easy. There were days filled with doubt and pain, but we persisted. I realized that healing wasn't a linear path, but rather a journey filled with ups and downs. As for Jake, I learned that he had moved away, seeking a fresh start away from the beach. Part of me felt relief, knowing that my actions had pushed him out of my life. But there was also a lingering guilt, a reminder of the man I had become. I never reached out to him, never sought to apologize. I knew that my actions had consequences and some things couldn't be undone. Instead, I focused on the present, on the woman sitting across from me who was willing to give me another chance. One evening, as we sat on the couch together, I turned to Lisa, the weight of my past still heavy on my heart. Thank you for being willing to work on this, I said, my voice sincere. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful you're still here. She smiled softly, and for the first time in a long time I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We all make mistakes, she replied. What matters is that we learn from them and grow together. In that moment, I realized that revenge had only brought me pain and regret. The true path to healing lay in love, understanding, and the willingness to forgive, not just others but myself. As I looked into her eyes, I knew that I was on the right path, and for the first time since my world had shattered, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. The journey wouldn't be easy, but together, we would navigate the storm and emerge stronger on the other side. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face whatever came next.